Welcome to the pre-show.
Welcome to the pre-show.
So we are recording on March 30th, 2022 on a Wednesday, 4 days after the music world found out that Taylor Hawkins, drummer for the Foo Fighters, had passed. And I think it was Friday or Saturday night. I can't remember now. It's all a blur.
It was definitely Saturday morning that we woke up to the news.
So Friday night then, yeah.
You were Friday night, yes.
I found out through Minaz. She texted me and said, "Hey, did you hear?" And I thought, you're talking about somebody else, like a former, the original, some guy who played one show. It could not have been Taylor. And yeah, it was shocking. Just shocking to me. To hear he was a ball of energy. He always had a smile on his face. He was a great drummer, and I think it's fair to say the best friend of Dave Grohl.
As I understand, yeah.
Yeah. And so I think, Greg, we have to let the cat out of the bag. I don't know if that's the right terminology to use, but for those who have been listening to us, at least for the past couple of years, or just under the past couple of years, might have heard us joke about Matt Damon and us having our own Matt Damon. And so anyone who is a fan of late night talk shows, especially the one hosted by Jimmy Kimmel, will know that he many times will say, "Oh, we don't have any more time for Matt Damon to come on," or they'll just go back and forth and just joke. And I don't think ever Matt Damon was ever a proper guest on the show. No, I don't know. Maybe he has.
I think Ben Affleck snuck Matt Damon in an oversized suit.
Yeah, that's right.
At the Oscars. It was the post-Oscars, if I'm not mistaken.
So what this all has to do with Taylor Hawkins is in the summer of 2020. Can we say her name? I think we can. I didn't
in my post. I just said an amazing.
I think we can. We had the wonderful and hilarious and talented Sass Jordan on the show. And we had just an amazing conversation, and she has worked with so many people. She's done stuff with Van Halen, and of course she shared the stage with the Foo Fighters. And in fact, many people now know that Taylor Hawkins was her drummer on the tour for her album Rat, which is an amazing album, which another former guest of ours helped Sass Jordan on Stevie Salas. Excuse me. Anyways, so Taylor Hawkins came into the conversation, and she spoke about him. And we just had a great chat with her that I just felt comfortable asking her if she can put us in touch with both Stevie and Taylor. So we got Stevie's email address. We've had Stevie on. And we got Taylor Hawkins' phone number. And we never did get Taylor on, but we spoke with Taylor. I texted him. No, I called him. And I said, "This is Kareem. I got your name from your friend Sass. We have a show. We'd love to have you on. This was in June. And on Thursday, June 25th at 4:54 p.m., I received a text, and I'm going to show this for the people on YouTube. You will see. Taylor Hawkins texted and said, "Hey, man, it's Taylor Hawkins. Sorry for the delay." And went about texting him. He called me one Friday. It might have been the Friday after this because this was a Thursday. I think he might have called me the next day while I was making fish and chips on the stove, and said he'd love to come on. He's not doing anything. And he just has, I think he had something with his daughter. Had to, certain time of day, had to pick up his daughter or drop his daughter somewhere. And it's all a blur, but you shared on your Facebook post that we were about to get him for that following week, I think. Mm-hmm. You had to, unfortunately, go up to the Manitoulin to put your dogs down. Mm-hmm. So he couldn't do it the next week, but he said he was open. And so began not a back and forth, but Kareem leaving a voicemail every now and again or sending Taylor a text message. And not that we ever thought, because we would joke, we're not going to get Taylor. He's just too big. He's just too busy. But, and so we never thought we'd ever get him, but it's sad that, it's sad for the world. It's sad for his family. It's sad for the Foo Fighters family. Obviously, it's sad for us because of the music, the loss of music from him. Yeah, and so that is our Taylor Hawkins story. And for those of you who want to hear stories about Taylor Hawkins from our guests, please go check out the episode where we spoke with Sass Jordan. She speaks about Taylor. And listen to Stevie Salas. Stevie Salas goes in depth about how he found Taylor, about the relationship. He considered him a brother, a little brother. They last spoke at, was it the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
Inducted, yeah. Yep. Where
they got inducted. I remember him saying, "I love you, man." You know, they had a little, I think they had a little bit of, not of a falling out, but they had a disagreement. And Stevie says he thinks it got better. But Stevie says, just kissed him on his head and said, "I love you." And goes into detail, in fact, about what that disagreement was about. So maybe we'll release that, no pressure, Greg, as a standalone. Maybe we can pull some of that out. But otherwise, please go listen to Stevie Salas and Sass Jordan. But Taylor Hawkins, born February 17th, 1972, died March 25th, 2022. Gone too soon. Phenomenal drummer. We're all going to miss him.
Well said. Well said.
Hi, the following podcast is brought to you by Radical Road Brewery, the best craft beer in the heart of Leslieville. Find them at 1177 Queen Street East. That's Radical Road Brewery.
Couple more questions for you, Sass.
Okay.
As I was doing my research, I came across, I must have watched like a dozen videos over the past couple of days of yours. And
I'm so sorry. My condolences.
I love your music. But I saw you on stage with the Foo Fighters.
Mm-hmm.
And Taylor Hawkins tells the story that he was in your band. You had hired him to drum. Well, tell me about that.
Yeah, that back to what I was saying about being the perfect launching pad for many people's careers.
Sass Jordan helped launch the Foo Fighters. That's what we're saying.
No, my name is Sass Jordan, Maker of Stars.
Maker of Stars.
That's my real name. And actually, I'm actually good with that. I like that idea. Yeah, I know. Dave says, well, if it wasn't for Sass Jordan,
Yep.
Taylor Hawkins wouldn't be in the Foo Fighters. And it's true. It's absolutely true. Taylor, yeah, he was just this kid from Laguna Beach. And we were looking for a drummer. Because Stevie was in my band at the time. And so he was like my right-hand man.
Mhm.
And we were told about this guy. And he drove up from Laguna Beach in his battered old Toyota pickup. And came up to Stevie's house at the time, and we had this sort of like corrugated tin shed outside the house, where we all played and rehearsed and stuff like that. And Taylor came and auditioned, and he was shit. He was total shit. However, he had this vibe and this energy. And when I say he was shit, he just wasn't experienced, is what I mean. It wasn't shit, obviously. He's an incredibly talented guy. I say kid. He's like in his 40s. To me, oh, he's a kid. But anyways, he was a delightful human being, and he was reeking of charisma even then. He was 22 years old. Okay, and I was like, Stevie, we're fucking hiring him. I don't care what you say. And he goes, no, I'm with you. I agree. I'll whip him into shape. And that's how it started. And he toured with me on the Rats album. And on the very last show of the tour in Los Angeles, my manager at the time, Lisa, said, I've got my friend Scott, who's a manager, has an artist who's about to go on tour, and they need to find a band. And they were wondering, if you minded if they, maybe hired some of the people in your band, because you're going on hiatus now. It was the end of my tour.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, absolutely not. My band, I can't keep them on retainer. They need to work. So of course they can go. Yeah, for sure. So they came to see us, this guy Scott and his artist, whose name goes down in history as Alanis Morissette. So it was that's how, so they hired Taylor and Nick Lashley, who was my guitar player. They hired them for Alanis's band, and it was right at the beginning of Jagged Little Pill. Nobody had heard of her yet, except for in Canada. But
of course,
I didn't live in Canada. None of us knew who the fuck it was. Like, we had never heard of her at all. And next thing you know, old Jed's a millionaire.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Good on him.
And it went from there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. He's
Absolutely.
also still one of my best friends in the world. So, he's a genuine, authentic human being with a great deal of love and appreciation. And he never forgot me. The first time he went to Europe, it was the first time he was in a real band, a real working band. So I took him to Europe and all over North America, and he never forgot it. And eventually, of course, Dave heard of him because he was in Alanis's band. It was a huge, yeah. And that's
awesome.
how life goes, kids. Yeah.
That's cool.
I told you we had a story to tell you. I think this is a great way to end this off. So about a year and a half ago, Gregg and I.
You're going here.
I'm going there. Why not?
Okay. All right.
So Stevie, a year and a half ago, Gregg and I had a chance to chat with Sass.
Yeah.
Great conversation.
One of our favorite episodes. Like, we just, my wife, we were up in the Manitoulin one time. My wife's like, I have not heard you laugh so much during a podcast recording as when you were with Sass.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
And I think we sang together as well on that episode. I think it might have been one of her songs or something like that. But anyway, so we're chatting.
I hope it was one of my songs.
It might have been. Yeah, it might have been one of the songs that you guys wrote together. But anyways, we had a great time, and I had never done this before. But I asked her, I said, hey, listen, we've had a great time. Can you put me in touch with, so I asked for your name, I sent you an email, but I probably mistyped it or whatever. But again, a year and a half ago, and she gave us the name of, and we're not going to say his name, but the name of the drummer that you introduced her to.
We call him Matt Damon because he's like our version of Matt Damon.
Yeah.
Okay. So he's texting back and forth with the drummer that's on the very beginning or one of the beginning interviews on your movie. And he said, well, actually, I'll leave that to you. Sorry, go ahead. So
I called him. So no, I texted him. You know who I'm talking to, right? So
that's it.
Yeah. So I texted him and he calls me. And so I swear to you,
he's a regular dude. Yeah. He's a regular dude.
Yeah. So he called. Now we're in the middle of the pandemic. So, Greg and I are assuming
that's every time
people are not doing anything. So he gives me a call. I said, hey, and I'm freaking out because I'm making dinner. I run to the house, talk to him on the phone and on my patio. And I say, yeah, we'd love to have you on. And I don't know if he thought, we'd love to have you on now that I was a radio guy. He says, yeah, he'll talk whenever. He's not doing much. He needs to go do something with his daughter, I think he said. And I said, perfect. I'll call you tomorrow. Well, Stevie, a year and a half has passed. and Greg said, every time I go, Greg, should I call him again? Greg says, forget it. Just don't call him.
He don't answer his.
So I'm going to ask you this, and whatever answer you give me is fine. We're not expecting, but could you put in a word for us? And
you know what? I didn't
just say we're nice guys.
I saw him at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame the other night. I kissed him on the top of the head and gave him a big hug. We were both in the front. That's the first time I've talked to him in quite a while. I had him playing the Salas album, but let me tell you, he got pissed off at me.
Oh boy.
Because him and I were talking, we were both pissed off that Dave Abergees got snubbed by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and Pearl Jam wasn't insisting that he go into Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with Pearl Jam. And Taylor said to me, yeah, that's bullshit. And I go, it is bullshit. And I kind of feel like I raised Taylor. I feel like I raised Taylor like my own half son, half little brother. And I knew what kind of this shit should have not sat with him, and rock and roll people should see like, I'm not going to sit for this shit. But these days they're all like, whoa, I don't want to get any problems, And when I grew up, every rock and roll guy created problems, when problems need to be created. So something bad happened. It wasn't that bad actually, but so what happened was there was a thing on my Facebook page, and Taylor and I were talking, and I'm talking months ago, and all of a sudden it was like, I'm really pissed off about the fact that Pearl Jam's not going to letting Dave Abergees in the Rock and Roll of Fame, because David plays with me a lot. He's played with me for years, and he was the engine of Pearl Jam. Their biggest years was Dave Abergees, and I think this is shitty. It's not right. And I was talking to Taylor, and Taylor being a drummer, and it doesn't sit well with him either. And it said something like Taylor was going to talk to Grohl. And that's all it said. And it was like some little write-up thing or something. It wasn't even major. But what happened was like 8 months later, when it's getting close to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, somebody took that thing on the whatchamacallit, on the Facebook post or Instagram post or whatever it was, and they took it and put it in a British magazine as big as life. And it said, Dave Grohl, the Foo Fighters are pissed off about Dave Abergees in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, right? They did one of those things that writers do, right? And Taylor calls me, he's fucking at rehearsal with Grohl, and he's pissed off. And I don't know what he's talking about. And he kind of explains it to me, and I go, dude, that was that thing, like 8 or 9 months ago. Remember we were on the phone and we were talking about that thing? Because he goes, yeah, you didn't give him that story, right? I go, of course not. He was like, oh, okay. But he was all like, and then we just never spoke again. And I was a little bit pissed because I think that David needed. Okay, because let me tell you, Taylor gets the gig with Alanis Morissette. Okay, he comes to my house, and the first guy he tells. Okay, David got the gig with the Foo Fighters. He showed up with his pickup truck at my house in the Hollywood Hills. I'm one of the first guys he told. Me and Taylor got this thing like that, right? So Taylor one day is on tour with Alanis Morissette. I think it's 1994, 95. I don't know what year it was. I don't know. And Dave Abergees is at my Hollywood Hills house. and hanging out for a bunch of days, and we're recording tracks for a new Color Code album. And Taylor calls up from tour. Hey, what's going on? I go, I'm just hanging out, blah, blah, blah. I go, Abraziz is over here and hanging out right now. And he goes, Dave Abraziz, because at this time, David Abraziz was the most famous drummer in the world. Dave Abraziz is there. Oh my God, you're kidding. I go, yeah, you want to say hi? He's washing dishes. Because he was the other day washing dishes in my sink. And so I give him the phone, and Abraziz, being the cool guy, is just like, hey, Taylor, what's going on, Dave? And Taylor was just like a little kid, like, oh my God, blah, 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 blah. You know, he's a fan, like we all are fans.